On July 4th of 1961, Jeannette Sullivan, 41, her daughter Denise, 14, and her fiancé Charles Boothroyd, 55, were visiting Utah from Connecticut when they spotted a man on the side of the road who looked like he needed help. When they pulled over to help this man, he attempted to rob the family, shooting Jeannette and then turning the gun to Charles, whom he shot twice. Denise jumped in the car and attempted to flee, but the man chased her down and was able to grab her, fleeing the scene with her. She was never seen again, and her case remains unsolved. July 4th, 1961, Denise, Jeannette, and Charles, who were visiting from Utah from Connecticut, drove Charles's 1960 green Volkswagen 17 miles outside of Moab. This is where they met with a man with dark hair and a dark complexion who spent 2 hours telling them the history of the area while the trio took pictures. At the end of these 2 hours, the man who never offered his name drove away in a tan sedan. The trio had plans to spend the night in Moab, and it was getting dark, so they decided to head in the direction towards Moab to look for a hotel. And just a short distance down the road, they saw the man that had just given them a tour of the area on the side of the road lying under his car. Charles pulled off to the side of the road and asked the man if he needed help. He said he was having trouble with his engine and asked to borrow a flashlight from Charles. Charles did have a flashlight in his vehicle and handed it over to the man, who then pulled out a .22 caliber rifle and began demanding money. Charles says that he laid his wallet on the road and that Jeannette pulled out $250 from her purse, laying it on the ground, and started to walk away. And that is when this man shot her in the back of the head and then turned to Charles and shot him twice in the face. This man would then grab Jeannette's body and roll her into a nearby ravine, leaving Charles lying on the ground where he fell. While this is happening, Denise jumped into Charles's car and attempted to drive away, but the shooter got into his vehicle, chasing Denise and running her off the road about a half a mile down the road. He then pulled Denise from Charles's car and dragged her into his car and sped away. An oil worker working a rig about 2 miles away heard the gunshot sounds and went to see what was going on. On the way down the road, he was passed by a speeding tan car, and then he came across a wrecked Volkswagen and drove a little bit further until he found Charles, still conscious, by the roadside. Charles told him what happened, and the oil worker used his radio to call for help. It would take 2 hours before an ambulance would arrive to assist Jeannette and Charles. In the archives, it states that Jeannette died of her wounds shortly after arriving to the hospital, but Charles did survive. Investigators launched an extensive search effort for Denise and the shooter, but there was no sign of them. 5 hours after the shooting, a man named Abel, a World War II vet with no criminal record, arrived at a mining camp in Polar Vista, where he had stayed several times before. A cook at the camp who recognized Abel said that he seemed nervous, but he kept to himself, except one time he did come up to her and ask if she did hear a woman scream. During the search for Denise on July 10th, authorities would find some of Abel's clothing nearby under a rock. They also found the .22 rifle that they were able to identify as the one being used during the shooting, hidden beneath the bush with a shovel of Abel's. They also located Abel's tan vehicle and determined that the paint scratches and other damage in his car were from when he rammed into Charles's car to take it off the road. They also found Abel's foot tracks and a smaller set parallel to them, and they believed those were Denise's. However, they didn't find any trace of Denise. When authorities were able to locate Abel and question him, they pulled him over in his vehicle, and as they approached him, he shot himself, taking all of his secrets to the grave with him. Investigators later discovered that on July 5th, Abel was spotted at Dead Horse Point, where he had stopped a truck driver and gave him an envelope and asked him to mail it. The envelope contained money and a note addressed to his wife telling her that he loved her and the children, but did not mention anything having to do with Denise, Charles, or Jeannette. Denise's case is still listed as missing, with Abel as the main suspect. Despite an extensive search, they have not been able to recover her remains, and they do believe she may be somewhere in the Polar Mesa area. If you have any information in this case, please contact the Grand County Sheriff's Office at 435-259-1346. Please keep sharing this case and Denise's face in hopes that we can bring her home. Thank you so much for taking the time to get to know Denise today, and don't forget, when you see those missing and murdered posts, share. Because every time we share a face, we do get closer to solving a case, and I will see you all back here tomorrow for another day in Utah.